So, before we begin, before we talk about what the exhibit is going to be, I want to kind of talk about what the exhibit is not going to be. So we're going to go through this little disclaimer here because there's just in so far it's like, what? Gee, is this in there? Is this in there? This exhibit could probably be a 12-part mini-series if we wanted it to be. There's so much that we could throw in. All right, and of course one of the things is like, well, where's the stuff on Swordsville Lake? It was huge. Yes, it was huge. And I will tell you that if you want to see a Cracker Jack exhibit on Swordsville Lake and the history of Swordsville Lake, you need to go to the Monroe Historical Society. They have a wonderful exhibit up there. They have an entire room dedicated to Swordsville Lake and Fantasy Farm. They have a full-scale model of the Screaming Eagle roller coaster that a gentleman put together for them. They have tons of memorabilia there. They are the county experts on Swordsville and Fantasy Farm, and we could not do it justice like they can right up, Route 63. So please go visit them, and they will, provide you with all the Swordsville Lake and Fantasy Farm things that you could want. Other things that we talked about, what we could include, we talked about, so obviously just summer activities or activities in general, not necessarily summer, but kind of activities that more geared towards. So roller rinks came up. We could have included a bunch of the roller rinks, and of course I was doing research on roller rinks and then I got down into the rabbit holes, and all of a sudden I was looking at old photos of roller derby, and which was fascinating as well. But so we kind of shied away from that, and of course we're also not going to talk about summer sports. The boys of summer. And there's things like that. So as far as baseball and things of that sort. So unfortunately, there will be no mention. That's the only Joe Nuxall you're going to get in the presentation there. So we kind of shied away from that as well, because really Butler County Sports is a presentation that we've done before. And we'll probably crack it out again sometime soon. So that's its own complete exhibit as well. So. We talked about putting in ice cream, ice cream places, soft serve, things of this kind, dairy whips, things of those kind of things. And again, we found out that there are, dozens upon dozens upon dozens of them. When you're dealing with a 20-year span, actually a little bit longer than that, because we're talking really kind of post-World War II up to 1969, there was just a ton of ice cream places. So we kind of shied away from those for the most part. People talked about, we were doing theaters, and we're like, oh, you got the Paramount in there. You got we're drive-in theaters. So any indoor sit-down theaters aren't going to be included in this, but that's another exhibit that we've done in the past. And so, we may bring those back out. So those kind of things aren't going to be touched either. In this exhibit. We're going to talk about drive-in restaurants, and not necessarily, so we're going to talk about drive-in restaurants that had car hop service. So of course that's the thing about, do you have this, do you have this, and well, you got the Red Barn there on High Street. No, it's not in this one. Yes, I'm not denying that it didn't exist, but it's not going to be in this one. And we always get people ask about Lums too, and it's like, the world's greatest hot dog. Well, yeah, but not going to be in this one. Yes, I realized that McDonald's was around. However, they didn't provide car hop service and stuff like that. But we did find out, though, that actually the Burger Chef that was on Erie Highway, actually for a little while when it first opened, actually did provide car hop service. So I'm going to provide a list here as we go through that has what we found. We thought, we were like, we knew there were A&Ws in Middletown and around, and eventually some of those became Jollies, and we knew there were some other drive-in restaurants that we knew of. When all was said and done through the research, we found, I think, 42 to 44 drive-in restaurants in Butler County, and we're sure that's not all of them because we just got very little information. We have very little resources for the eastern side of the county. so there's probably some missing. As far as we could tell, there was not a drive-in restaurant with car hop service in Oxford. If somebody knows otherwise, please let me know, because we can add it. I have a feeling we're already wrong based on the thing up here. But again, the resources, the further you get out, the resources become less and less. So please let me know what that might be. Oh, okay, good. I thought you were like, nope, yeah, you don't. There was one, you don't have it, because I said there wasn't. Okay, good. Well then, never mind. My perfection remains. So those are the kind of things that we are not going to talk about. So we'll get to the stuff that we will talk about. So concept of drive-in theaters, where people watch movies from their cars, kind of appeared the first time in 1933 by a gentleman by the name of Richard Hollingshead. He basically created it to offer a more comfortable, accessible movie experience for those who, oddly enough, found going to indoor theaters what he considered it was oppressing. Obviously, you have to sit closer to people that you don't know, as you're all doing right now. There's always the people who choose to talk and things during film. So you're in a car with your family, or maybe with somebody who you hope someday will be your family. So he opens the first drive-in movie theater in June of 1933 in Camden, New Jersey. It basically was a facility that could hold 400 cars, which was kind of a standard, but a little on the small side. But that early, that was kind of impressive. Of course, drive-ins boom in popularity after World War II. During the 1950s and the 1960s, which coincides with the increase in car ownership, suburban growth, and they basically became a convenient and family-friendly entertainment option that is fairly inexpensive at the time. So at the peak in the late 1950s, there were over 4,000 drive-in theaters in the United States. Today, there are less than 200, and we are lucky enough to have one of them here in the county with the Holiday. Just out, west of town. So they became an iconic part of American culture. They catered to families, teenagers. Again, a unique blend of privacy, but yet shared experience and things like that. A lot of them became family entertainment places. You had putt-putt golf courses with the drive-in theater. You had playgrounds. You had things of that sort to help that. But in the 1960s, it began to face some challenges, rising land values, development, competition from indoor multi-screen cinema complexes created competition. And is when in the late 1960s, early into the 1970s is when drive-ins became known for showing the B type of movies, because the first run films were going to the indoor theater. So, and like I said, by now we have a fraction of the ones that we used to have. But we used to have, the Stockton Outdoor Auto Theater, which became the Acme, was considered to be the first drive-in theater in Butler County. It opened in early 1943. And was located at 6130 Dixie Highway in Fairfield Township, which was the site of a former racetrack. It was a former dog track during Prohibition, and then it became an auto track for a while, and then it became the drive-in. So in 1945, ownership was taken over by two gentlemen, by the gentleman by the name of Mark Cummins. Later, a gentleman by the name of Ben Cohen buys it, and initially the sound was provided by giant speakers that were mounted on top of the screen. Nearby neighbors complained about that immensely, and eventually the individual auto speakers would be installed. It became the Acme in 1948, and in 1964 the facility installed, and we actually have an example of this in the exhibit, an EPRAD Theater Supply Company hot shot car heater, which allowed them to stay open year-round. They were out of Toledo, Ohio. So in 1972, the Acme would gain infamy when Cohen decided to show X-rated films, including Fritz the Cat. 2 weeks of intense police and public pressure, Cohen finally caved and canceled the showings. The facility could accommodate 300 cars. It was fairly small, had a single screen, and the last year of operation was 1987. The site is now entirely commercial retail properties. The Dixie Cruise Inn was located at 3009 North Main Street, 2 miles south of Middletown, just north of Excello. It opened in September of 1947. Contained one screen and held 600 cars. It was operated by a gentleman by the name of L.J. King of Dayton and Dan Spiegel of Cincinnati, and it was constructed for a cost of $170,000. It included a parking ramp, individual RCA brand speakers, electric in-car heaters for each auto. In 1963, the Associated Theaters of Cleveland Company purchased the operation and ran it for a while until 1970 when a gentleman by the name of Earl Cox purchased it. He also opens and ran the Starglow Drive-In Theater at the time, which we will talk about here shortly. The theater screened its last movie in 1997, so it actually hung around later than most. It was demolished and it's now the home of the local Moose Lodge 501. They're just south of Excello. Here in town, the Ramona Drive-In was situated on the corner of Dixie Highway and Clinton Avenue. It opened in May of 1950. It cost $185,000. It accommodated 800 vehicles, so at the time of its construction, it was the largest drive-in theater in the county. The base of the screen tower also held a 20 by 40 stage and dressing rooms. They would actually have live stage shows there, which sounds interesting. The theater was operated by a gentleman by the name of George Terlucas, and in October of 1954 he installed a 124-foot by 62-foot CinemaScope screen, which replaced the old screen, which meant that the Ramona Drive-In Theater had the largest screen for a drive-in theater in the state of Ohio. Plans of the site also included a concessionary with television screens for those who wanted to watch TV instead of movies. And a swimming pool, which would double as an ice rink in the wintertime, but neither of those ideas became a reality. In 1962, operations were assumed by the Associated Theaters of Cleveland, and at the end of the season in 1967, the Ramona ceased operations and the property was sold for the construction of a new retail development, which featured a Rinks discount department store and other retail businesses. The Riverview Theater was located on Ohio Route 128 between Hamilton and Ross. It opens in December of 1956, so the grand opening is in the middle of winter. Obviously, it had the car heaters as well. One screen, 400 car capacity. It was a small theater. It was actually down in the valley between the valley and the river on the south side. It was owned by a gentleman by the name of William Fraley and a gentleman by the name of Richard Logston. In 1966, it was purchased by Ben Cohen, who also owned the Acme and the Holiday at the same time. He completely rebuilds the facility, installs new equipment, changes the name to the Colonial Drive-In, and its grand opening was in May of 1967. The Colonial would cease operation at the end of the season in 1987, and though the screen would remain standing until the late 2010s. The site is now a supply business for topsoil and fill dirt. The Hamilton Outdoor Theater originally opened in September of 1948. It was a single-screen theater and accommodated 850 vehicles, so it became the largest at the time. For a brief time, the theater was also known as the Hamilton West Auto Theater. In 1951, Mark Cummins purchased the property and changed the name to the Holiday Auto Theater, and eventually Ben Cohen would assume operation, and he would also come to operate both the Colonial and Acme drive-ins later. Soon, the Holiday became the crown jewel of Cohen's Holiday Amusement Company, which he started, and at its peak would operate nearly 100 screens nationwide by the 1970s. So in June of 1995, local movie enthusiasts and businessmen C. Fred Baum and Gregory Reinhold purchased the site from Cohen's widow and invest heavily in the theater. And in 1999, the site was the center of controversy when Baum attempted to add a second screen on the site, but it was denied by county commissioners. Baum sued the county, was unsuccessful, and upon his passing in 2007, new ownership of Todd Chansey carried on the legacy of Butler County's only remaining drive-in theater. They just opened, I want to say, the last week of May. So Earl Cox, who also had owned the Dixie Auto Cruise Inn, started the Star Glow Drive-In at 2835 Cincinnati Dayton Road. It opened in July of 1955. It contained a single screen and a parking ramp holding 500 autos, with plans to increase to 750 autos, but that would not be realized. The site was equipped with in-car heaters, year-round operation. It closed in 1989. Cox would eventually construct the Town East Indoor Cinemas on the adjacent property. That business is now also defunct, and that building is vacant. The site's now a trucking company with parking, storage, and a salvage yard. In 2023, the screen in the concessions building were still standing, though the ticket booth was removed the year earlier in 2022. So there are still remnants of the Star Glow as you drive by that you can actually see. The Valley Drive-In was located north of New Miami at 2380 Hamilton-Eaton Road, and it was the largest drive-in theater in the county with one screen. It had space for 1,150 cars when it was constructed in 1955. First showing occurred in June of 55. It was equipped with a 110-foot by 62-foot CinemaScope screen. It included what was diffused moonlight lighting system to create a Leschart lit environment. In-car heaters allowed for year-round operation. The Valley was conceived and operated by George Turkulis, who also owned and operated the Ramona. Eventually, Ben Cohen of Holiday Amusements would take over the operation, which gave him nearly all but one or two of the drive-in theaters in the county. So he owned 5 of the 7 that were operating at that time. Valley closed at the end of the 1986 season. Soon after, the property was cleared except for the screen and was sold for light industrial and storage use. The screen tower was eventually demolished in 2002. And if you go through the exhibit, you will see that one of the neon letters that was on the back of that screen tower was generously loaned to us by Mr. Steve Searley, and that is on display in the exhibit. So there were 7 drive-in theaters in Butler County from 1943 till most of them went out in the late 1980s, except for the Holiday, which exists. Drive-in restaurants emerged in the 1920s and 1930s. They offered a new and convenient way for Americans to enjoy food without leaving their cars, because that's what we're all about, is making something the easiest that we can. So if we can drive and eat at the same time, or drive and put our makeup on at the same time, that's awesome. And again, it was paralleled with the growing obsession of the automobile at that time. So the first true drive-in restaurant is widely considered to be a restaurant that was called Pig Stand Number 1. It opened in Dallas, Texas in 1921 by a gentleman by the name of Jesse Kirby and Reuben Jackson. Early locations featured car hops, servers who would take orders, deliver food to the vehicles, and sometimes for added flair, they would wear roller skates. They surged in popularity after World War II when car culture exploded and suburban life expanded. Chains like A&W and Sonic and Frost Stop and Dog and Suds embraced this model and became national chains. Architecture is often featured bright neon signs. And I thought this was a typo when I was doing the research, but there was the style of design for a lot of 1950s drive-ins and other 1950s style of architecture was apparently called the Googie style of architecture. I was not aware of that, but if you are, then you got one up on the architecture Jeopardy category. So covered canopies, curb service, again, odd angles, things of that sort, a very modernistic look for the 1950s. Drive-in restaurants became the sign of prosperity for post-war America, teenage freedom, also paired with drive-in movie theaters and that cruising culture that became big in the 1950s and 1960s. In the 1960s and into the 1970s, the advent of the drive-through window for the most part pretty much killed curb service. It was cheaper, it was easier, it was faster, and actually the first restaurant chain to install a drive-through window, anybody know what it is? McDonald's. Wrong. No. It was actually Burger Chef. Actually, Burger Chef was the first restaurant chain to install a drive-through window, and of course that was. And now they're the few national chains. Sonic is one, but most towns still have one or two possible old nostalgic remnants of the drive-in of the drive-in restaurant, and we are lucky to have one here. And speaking of, 1922, Roy Allen and Frank Wright partnered for their first A&W drive-in restaurant, and I think it's a pretty cool coincidence that their last name started with A and W, and they called their restaurant that. Thank you. I'll be here all week. Allen bought out his partner's stake in 1924. He began franchising his root beer recipe in 1925, and in 1926 he opens his first restaurant franchise, and the rest, as they say, is history. Butler County's first A&W opens in 1938 when Wisconsin natives Vince and Betty Jolivet begin operations at their small stand at 210 North Erie Boulevard as Jolly's A&W. In 1963, Jolivet opens another location at 90 North B Street, which was in operation until 1969. Vince Jr. opens the Fairfield Nilles location in 1973, closes in 2009, and the A&W menu sign that we have in the exhibit came from that store when it closed. Son Michael opens the 651 North Brookwood location in 1978. It's still in operation and now run by his son Michael. Greg Jolivet assumed operations of the North Erie location after his mom Betty retires in 1979, and of course that location is also still serving footlongs and root beer. Their A&W franchise runs out in 1981 and 1982, and the drive-in simply became known as Jolly's after that, dropping the A&W. There were two longtime A&W sites in Middletown. The first one was located at 2009 South Main Street on the northeast corner of Lafayette. It was opened in 1956 by a gentleman by the name of Ken Metzger. Mr. Metzger continued to operate this restaurant as Ken's Drive-In after his A&W franchise expires in 1979, and he eventually closes that location in 1983. And that's a picture of that. The upper right there is a picture of the Lafayette and Main Street, and that building is still standing. It's been vacant for a long time. But that has a kind of interesting, cool, personal connection to me because my father actually worked at that A&W from 1960 to 1961. His last 2 years in high school, he actually worked there and ran cover for apparently illegal pinball gambling operations that would happen in the lobby every Friday night. The other A&W franchise in Middletown was located at 2600 Germantown Road in Poasttown. It opened in 1959, later became J&W Drive-In. It now still operates now as J&E Root Beer Stand. And in 1959 to 1960, there was also an A&W located at a truck stop at 3301 South Main Street near Excello. Bob Spears and his wife Helen opened a small drive-in restaurant at 2030 Fairgrove Avenue in 1953. The roof of the building is adorned with a large creamy whipped cone, which also advertises cold root beer. Spears' signature hamburger was a double-decker with tartar sauce, lettuce, pickles, cheese. Sounds familiar. And he called it the Big Bob's. Clear take on the popular Frisch's sandwich of the time. In 1957, Spears sells to Roy Hyde. He purchased the stand with his wife Ida. Hyde's brother Hub is running the sit-down restaurant on Erie Boulevard at the time, and the brothers help basically cross-promote each other's restaurant, and Hyde's Drive-In basically steadily grows in popularity among the locals. Hyde kept his predecessor, Big Bob's Burger, and Ida was responsible for preparing the stand's famous onion rings every day. Sadly, the drive-in ceases operations in 2009, and a short time after that, the building is demolished, and it's now a vacant lot. But we were lucky enough to have a gentleman by the name of Chris Swain who collects a wide variety of things. So the actual original Hyde's root beer barrel dispenser and the sign is actually in there. Those came from him. So we appreciate that very much. Speaking of Frisch's, or what used to be Frisch's, Dave Frisch opens up Cincinnati's first year-round drive-in restaurant on Worcester Pike in Fairfax in 1939. He called it Frisch's Mainlander due to its proximity to Lunken Airport, or Lunken Field at the time. And shortly after World War II, Frisch struck a deal with Bob Wien, who was the founder of the Big Boy name under his chain of Bob's Big Boy out in California. Wien sold franchise rights to Frisch for 4 states, including Ohio. And Frisch decides he wants to slightly change Wien's recipe for the signature Big Boy double-decker hamburger. He replaces the mayo and red relish in the California version with tartar sauce and dill pickles, and the Frisch's Big Boy is invented. Hamilton's first Frisch's restaurant and drive-in opens in 1952 at 314 North Erie Boulevard, next to Vince Jolivet's A&W. It would eventually become the site of a Jerry's restaurant. 1958, another location is added at 1475 Pleasant Avenue, which operates until 1966. And that picture of this crew right here is actually from that Pleasant Avenue store. The North Erie location relocates in 61 to 2589 Dixie Highway and in 1968 to 2949 Dixie Highway. That location closes in 2024. The West Side location at 1220 Main Street opens for business in 1970, and that location is still in business. Middletown saw their first Frisch's Drive-In in 1954 when Jerry Brown opens his restaurant at 3207 South Main Street. And this is actually a picture of, it was in the back of a Middletown yearbook, school yearbook, and that sign is actually the South Main Street Frisch's, and some local middies there enjoying the food for the photo. 2 years later, in 1956, Jerry's brother Ralph opens his location near the hydraulic canal at 1612 Germantown Road. Ralph then decides after a couple years to leave the business, and his brother then purchased that and moves it just up the street to 1800 Germantown Road, which is where it was located until it closed earlier this year, this spring, in early 2025. And we'll stick with Middletown, and we'll go to Central Avenue. So the Jug is one of the oldest operating drive-in restaurants in the United States. The Middletown landmark opened in the spring of 1932. Middletown Journal employee Bert Lawler and his wife Alice opened a small hamburger and root beer stand on South Main Street near the present entrance to Barnett Stadium, which is the Middletown High Stadium. At the end of the first day, business, the till had a whopping, was just shy of $8. But in 1932, I guess that's pretty impressive for your first day of business. But business only improved from there. The menu featured quality, simple items, including fast-seared fresh hamburger. In 1939, they moved the successful establishment to the southwest corner of Central Avenue and Highview Road. 9 years later, in 1948, they moved one lot to the west to 3610 Central Avenue, which is where the restaurant is still located today. Richard Henderson, after becoming an employee of the Lawlers in 1945, comes back and becomes the drive-in's longest tenured owner. He owned it from 1965 to 2001. It is now currently owned by another Middletown native who has come back to town and pretty much tries to copy the original methods and of cooking, and they are pretty good. I'm not going to lie. Other drive-in theater or drive-in restaurants that were in the county, we had a wide variety of mom and pop local ownership, regional ownership, and as well as several national chains. So you had Country Kitchen. This is Country Kitchen up in Middletown. You have, there's the Jerry's that we were talking about, which later became Hambuco Credit Union. And now I think it's some kind of social service thing. We had two Frost Tops in the county. We had one on the west side on 128, which is now where the KFC building stands. We had another one that was on the corner of Hicks and Route 4 in Fairfield. When I moved to Fairfield in 1974, it was known as Bobo's Ice Cream, make your own sundaes. But it was previously Walsh's Frost Top. And of course, right across from Frisch's on Dixie Highway was Carter's, which was a regional chain, Cincinnati chain. And that was the first chain that actually, before Harlan Sanders opened his own stores, he was selling his chicken through Carter's. And so we had one of those here in town as well. Highland Drive-In was located on Millville Avenue. It would go through a series of ownership. It would eventually, probably you know it more as Hickory Hut. So that was that location. Henry's Hamburgers was a national chain. It was located in the 500 block of North Sutphin Street up in Middletown. That whole block is now an entrance ramp to University Boulevard, so that location is gone. The B&M Drive-In was actually directly across the street from the Holiday Drive-In Theater out in Hamilton Township. And there's a picture of the Ranch Drive-In, which was located right next door to the Fairfield School there on Route 4 near Nilles Boulevard. And as like I mentioned before, we found, I think it's 42 drive-in theaters as we started. We started out with probably a handful, 5, 6, 7, and then we just kept finding more and more and more. And a lot of these, again, you had one location that maybe through its life had 4 different restaurants at that location and things of that sort. So, but again, there they all are. Again, some of them are local. Some of them lasted a year. Some of them lasted a long time. I've found out during research for this that my wife's father, who I never met because he had passed before we met, actually ran the Parkette Drive-In for a while. And we kind of think we know where it is because Burl Joyce loved to cook. And we noticed that the Parkette in 1961, 1962 shifted from serving hot dogs and hamburgers to fried chicken, turkey dinners, meatloaf, and things of that sort, spaghetti, which he cooked a lot apparently. So that's kind of what we think that happened there. But I had never heard of most of these, but I'm not a Hamiltonian or anything else like that. Yes, Rich.
Is Schuler's Drive-In, the bottom of the column in the middle, related to Schuler's Wigwam down in North Bend?
I don't believe so. Yeah, I'm familiar with, I don't believe so. They were a local family. They basically bought a previously existing drive-in, and that was in operation for just a couple years. It was not a long prolonged thing. So those are that. And like I said, you got Burger Chef up there because they did for about a year have car hop service before they went to the drive-through window and things of that sort and things of that kind of thing. So, again, somebody's like, oh, well, there was a Dairy Queen out in Ross. Yes, there was. And those were considered drive-in restaurants because you pulled your car right up to the building. And McDonald's was that way, too. You got out and you ordered at a window, and then you went to the next window and they gave you your food. But we, again, tried to focus on things that had car hop service where they would bring it out to you. So we had to basically pare down the best way we could, or otherwise we would have, hundreds of things. Yes, ma'am? Well, that's a little bit before my time, but I have seen pictures. She's going to answer.
Jolly's did. I had a cousin who worked.
Yeah, and the reason for the roller skates, apparently, it was strictly, I guess, a lot of managers dictated that the car hops had to be on roller skates because theoretically that made them faster. I'm not sure if that's true or not, but that was the whole idea. So it wasn't just a gag. It was supposed to be so they could be, to be quicker. And I know, like the original Sonics down south, they were required to wear roller skates. I don't think they are anymore. But yeah, so that was the whole idea of the roller skate type thing. So, soft drinks. Now, I chose this one because I just love the fact that they're giving an infant 7-Up. I just love it. But that's the 1950s when, you had doctors coming out after surgery smoking a cigarette talking about how good smoking was for you and how it calmed your nerves and things of that. So actually soda and carbonated beverages can be traced back all the way to medieval Middle East. When they basically had fruit-flavored drinks that they would sweeten with sugar or syrup or honey became popular. Joseph Priestley in 1767 invents a way to insert carbon dioxide into water and then hence carbonation is born. Johann Schweppes in 1783 bottles and sells the first carbonated mineral water in Europe. Mineral waters at that time believed to have health properties and could help you and make you healthy. And by the late 1700s, American pharmacies began offering artificial mineral waters as health tonics, things of that sort. And drugstores across the U.S. began mixing carbonated water with flavored syrups, usually sometimes containing medicinal ingredients or ingredients that they thought were medicinal, like coca from coca leaves, which Coca-Cola used early on, and then of course cola nuts, which is basically or high in caffeine, to give you that pep. By the 1850s, soda fountains became popular in American drugstores, and pharmacists, were basically experimenting. And if you go back and trace it, most early sodas were the invention of a pharmacist, just by mixing things together. The earliest U.S. sodas, Dr. Pepper in 1885, was invented in Waco, Texas, and it's believed to be the oldest soft drink in the United States. Coca-Cola, 1 year later in 1886, John Pemberton, originally formulated as a medicinal tonic, gained its popularity quickly, but later very quickly also shed the medicinal claims. Coca-Cola is kind of a late starter, 1893, but it wasn't actually named Pepsi until 1898. It was actually called Brad's drink at the time. And it was, again, pushed out as a digestive aid. 7-Up had lithium in it. You had a bunch of other things that, they were, but that was to help you and things of that sort. A lot of them also, you had, phosphates, which contained phosphorus, and things of that. And these were supposed to, believed to actually cure what ails you. 1920s and 1950s, advances in bottling techniques and things like that. So we now start to get away from the soda fountains and things of that sort because now bottling becomes easier. Franchising becomes popular, and of course Coca-Cola becomes the main franchiser and takes that idea and runs with it completely. And so you have, even very soon after the turn of the century, you start to have national brands popping up. Things like that, because before that it was mostly local regional bottlers, which we're going to kind of go through because we actually had several here and things of that sort. In the Depression, Coca-Cola comes out with the idea of a 12-ounce bottle for 5 cents, which is double the size and half the price of what Coca-Cola was doing at the time. They held on to that 7 or 8 ounce bottle for a long time. So that was a major sales strategy. And then, of course, then you have, in the 1960s, you have the proliferation of all these other types of flavored drinks. Diet drinks come out. So you have the first diet soda was called NoCal in 1952. Diet Right comes out in 1958. Diet Pepsi comes out in 1964. Coca-Cola was really late to the diet fad. In 2025, the U.S. soft drink market is estimated to generate about $388 billion this year. If that were translated into GDP, and I did this, the country of carbonated beverages that was sold in the U.S. would rank just behind Hong Kong, and would be 38th out of the top 200 producing countries in the world. So there are only 38 countries ahead of the U.S. soda market in terms of all the goods that they sell. So we'll start with the biggie. We'll start with Coke. It's the largest and most successful beverage manufacturer. Again, traces its root back to Atlanta. John Pemberton is a pharmacist. He concocts a soda recipe in 1886. Yes, the original recipe called for coca extract in the form of cocaine. However, this ingredient was removed in 1903, so very early on. But I always said, people say, if you have a time machine, what would you do? What would you do? And I would go back and do this, or I would go back and do this. I would go back just because I want to taste what an actual real Coca-Cola with cocaine in it tastes like. I don't know. In 1891, another Atlanta pharmacist named Asa Chandler purchased the rights to Pemberton's drink. and the Coca-Cola Company is born. He incorporates it the following year. Butler County's early Coca-Cola supply is provided by individual agents who basically purchase the product from Cincinnati and Dayton bottlers and then sell it locally. So there is no local bottling manufacturing facilities yet in the county. George Hersner opens a small bottling facility in 1921 at 6th and Heaton Street, but he doesn't follow the guidelines that Coke stipulates that you have to. So he loses his franchise very early on because I guess he thought he knew better. So in 1931, a new facility is opened at 623 Walnut Street. Expansion was necessary, and in 1938, they built a new plant at the junction of Dixie and Erie highways. And that company would stay at this location until 1965, when newer and more modern capabilities were needed. And yet another new facility was built at Peck Boulevard and Knightsbridge. And that facility is still standing. It's now owned and operated by Miami University Hamilton campus. But that was where that was. Middletown received its Coca-Cola supply early on from Dayton bottlers, but in June of 1949, construction begins on a new bottling facility at 110 South Verity Parkway, and all of those photos come from the Middletown bottling facility. New state-of-the-art facility opens in 1950. Passers-by, there's a huge, large front window that allows viewing of most of the plant's processes, which was, basically the stories are that you could drive by Verity and there would be just groups of people watching the process go by. A lot of kids, teenagers, but actually adults as well. Operations would remain there until a new facility is constructed at South University Boulevard in 1976. In 1982, that facility is closed. Coca-Cola operations moved back to Dayton. So, Grandpop, again, Pepsi, New Bern, North Carolina, Caleb Bradham, experiments with flavors, and in 1893 he mixes a blend that locals immediately take to. Again, initially it was called Brad's Drink. In 1998 he changes the name to Pepsi Cola. His first venture into Butler County came in 1910 when the J. Pabst Soda Company here in town was hired to contract bottle it for a short time. In 1936 they had a small distribution warehouse in Middletown, but Grandpop Bottling Company out of Cincinnati had a well-established line of their own drinks, and they were contracting for others such as Nesbitt's and New Grape. They won the Coca-Cola franchise bottling in 1935, and by this time they were using the 12-ounce bottle that sold for a nickel. And in 1940, Grandpop decides to build a bottling facility on Erie Highway and Edison Avenue. In 1953, Grandpop becomes G&J Pepsi, which is what it's still called today. That facility, the Hamilton facility, was one of the consistently highest and most cost-effective of J&G's 5 regional plants. 82, they moved the operations to a new building on Bob Meyer Road, and in 1988, the bottling facilities are closed. However, that warehouse is still used as a distribution, and the old plant is now the home of Third Eye Brewing. High Grade was initially founded in 1927 by William Heckerman and John Engel. The bottling works were located at 258 North B Street, the former home of the Doherty, Pfister, and Coulter, dealers of Purina Feeds and the Pride of Kitchen flour line. In 1928, that company is dissolved. However, it's reborn in 1929 with new leadership. And so, excuse me, John Engel and Andrew Shore, who left Freckling Dairy to basically join his team. And so the team would manage the company until 1958. High Grade was known for a vast number of unique flavors and sodas and mixers. 55, they moved to a new facility at the corner of Milliken and C Street. That building would later become the home of Butler Landmark Co-op. It still stands at 140 Milliken Street. In 1958, Robert Beeler took over operations until the company closes in 1964. Jacob Pabst began carbonated and still water drinks in Hamilton in 1876 on the west side of Cincinnati Street, which is now Central Avenue, between Woods, which is now Pershing Avenue, and Chestnut Streets. The company mainly dealt in ciders and vinegars early on, and upon Jacob's death, the company is incorporated, renamed the J. Pabst & Sons Company, with sons Daniel, Charles, and Christian serving as the first officers. The company's slogan was purity and superiority, and for 92 years, Pabst named and bottled a vast array of beverages, with their Imperial Ginger Ale being the star of the lineup. Popular soda flavors throughout the decades included grape, cream soda, orange, lemon lime, cherry phosphate, champagne mist, root beer, and an intriguingly named drink they called Iron Brew. Don't really know what that was. They also bottled beverages touting health benefits from simple distilled water to Lithia water, which was said to, that's the lithium-infused water, which is said to help with rheumatism. And Vichy water, which was supposed to cure stomach ailments. So not only did they bottle their own creations, but they were also a very large contract bottler. They were the first to contract bottle Pepsi Cola in the area in 1910. They also contracted Ward's Lime, Lemon, and Orange Crush brands for a while. Shericola, which came out of Lexington, Kentucky. They bottled Hires Root Beer for a while, and Dr. Pepper for quite a while. In 1968, the company was struggling in the beverage market. They decided to get out of the beverage market and go into the vending machine business. Unfortunately, by 1973, Pabst closes its doors at 611 Central Avenue, where it had been for 97 years. But till the very end, a member of the Pabst family had been in charge. Barks, Gaston and Charles Barks, 1890, in Biloxi, Mississippi. So by 1937, there were 62 bottling plants in 22 states for Barks, including the one in Cincinnati, Ohio. And in fact, it was the Cincinnati bottling plant in 1937 that introduced red dye to the Barks cream soda, and Red Pop is born. Corporate liked the idea so much they ordered all their plants across the country to add the red dye. Most of you probably remember seeing Barks hawked by Captain Wendy on WCPO's Uncle Al show. Pink Cow, and right after that they would hawk the Mama's Cookies as well. So from 1947 to 1963, the Barks bottling plant was located at 802 South 7th Street. Barks products were initially bottled in Cincinnati and shipped to a warehouse in Hamilton, but in 1946 it was decided that Butler County was a big enough market, and they built a plant there on 7th Street. While the 7th Street plant was being outfitted, they actually were being run from a house on Hensley Street. The Hamilton Bark plant began bottling a brand known as Get Up in 1954. It was one of the earlier low-calorie drinks. And in 1958, the local plant also bottled Double Cola, contractually wise, as well as Tom Collins Jr., which would then soon be bottled by Pepsi. Barks was purchased by Coke in 1995. And the site of the old Hamilton Barks Bottling Company is currently now a vacant lot. Knee-High begins in 1905 and shows up in Butler County in 1935. The Knee-High chemists come up with a cola. They decide to call it Royal Crown Cola and so forth. But by 1959, the company changes its name from Knee-High to Royal Crown Cola Company. They came to Ohio and Butler County in 1929 when a guy by the name of Clancy Wolf opens a small franchise bottling and distribution facility at 122 Magnolia Street, which is just a couple blocks to the east of us. In 1945, the plant would relocate to Erie Highway at Pennsylvania Railroad Crossing for 5 years, and then it was closed and bottling went back to Cincinnati. Alan Carter Back and his wife Nellie began Carter's Beverages in 1932 in Middletown of Ohio out of a garage behind their house. But Back decides to get into the soda and mixer game. He leaves a career in the dairy business that he'd been in since he was 17. In 1937, the company is expanding at a pace that forces them to expand. So they purchase 2 homes next to their residence on Germantown Road, and they continue from there until 1941. Trying to operate a growing soda business out of converted residences was problematic. And across the road from these businesses, Aranca Aircraft was making a name for itself. Hook Field was always the center of activity, so what did Back do? He purchased the land that was in between those 2 facilities and built a new plant at 1800 Germantown Road, which would be the home of Carter's Beverages until he gives it up in 1965. Carter's operated until 1967 when Carl Holloman purchased it and it will disappear 2 years later. And actually, those are Mr. Holloman's children, and in promotional photos pushing a contractually bottled Whistle orange soda that Carter was bottling at the time. Carter's also bottled Donald Duck soda, which was a Disney product for a while, 3V Cola, Veso Cola, and Whistle, to name a few. So, the rise of public swimming pools comes as a recreational source in the 1920s. Before that, they were seen as needed for health. They were actually bathing. They weren't for recreation and things of that sort. So 1920 sees this huge surge nationwide of recreational swimming pools. That was then bumped during the Great Depression. A lot of public swimming pools were built as WPA projects and things of that sort. 1950s and 1960s starts to see the decline of the public swimming pool, even though in this area is when a lot of them were built. But it was definitely a post-war phenomenon. So here in Hamilton, there were 4 public pools. So you had Eastview Pool, which was the oldest of all of Hamilton city pools. It was constructed in 1924. It had been proposed as early as 1922. Public fundraising program raises $14,000 out of the $23,000 needed to build the pool in 1922. The rest was paid by the city's Park Board of Commissioners. It had a wading pool, a bathhouse. However, the most unique feature of Eastview Pool was an electric fountain that was located in the middle of the pool, which sounds dangerous to me, but just hope it doesn't short. Northside Pool, though it was officially named by Hamilton city officials as Northside Pool, most in the public called it, some in the public called it the Westside Pool, but most people actually called it Wilson Pool due to its proximity to Wilson Junior High. City officials gave the go-ahead for the new pool in 1947. However, it would not open up until the summer of 1950. Its most popular feature was the sun deck. It was a popular spot for swimmers to lounge, dry off, and work on their tans. Lindenwold Pool. Officials approve a pool in Lindenwold in 1947. It was be located on Cleveland Avenue. There were going to be 2 pools. One was on Cleveland Avenue. The other was on Hoadley. Well, the one on Cleveland becomes Wilson. The one on Hoadley is actually held off because the city decides we can't build 2 pools the same year. So even though it was approved in 1947, Lindenwold would not get its own pool until 1957, 10 years later. It was constructed, though due to its proximity to George Washington Junior High, most residents did not call it the Lindenwold Pool. They called it George Washington Pool. And they continued to call that until its demise. In 1960, there were serious debates among city officials to determine if Hamilton needed a 4th swimming pool. City was looking to sell 52 acres on New London Road. Many believed that land should go to the expansion of Potter's Golf Course. However, city officials and community leaders and residents of the North End believed the sale of that land should go to provide a public pool in the North End. They wanted a pool, even though it was only a half a mile or a little more than a half a mile away from Eastview. But they would finally get their wish 7 years later in 1967 when the North End Pool would be constructed. All the Hamilton public pools would be closed in 2008 due to cuts in the city's budget. And then we have the wonderful invention of the splash pads jumping up everywhere. Middletown had 3 public pools. Sunset Pool was the first and largest of the pools. It was located on Belamonte Avenue. The city purchased the land in 1917, and in 1920 they create the new park, and the pool is finally opened in 1924. It included all the mounting amenities of a swimming pool required of that time. The interesting feature of Sunset Pool, it was actually a 2-level design. It actually had a waterfall that would go down to the lower level. And in 1952, the pool received a major rehabilitation. In 1978, it was replaced with a new pool, and the Middletown community's favorite summer recreation spot was demolished in 2011. Douglas Park and Swimming Pool was named after famed abolitionist Frederick Douglass. However, the powers that be in Middletown misspelled the name of the pool and only put 1 S instead of 2. And that's the way it stayed. In 1932, Armco Steel sold the land in Middletown for $1 to build, and the stipulation was that with the land that they sold, there needed to be a park and a swimming pool put there. And Middletown obliged. It opened in 1933, served locals until 1980 when it was replaced with upgraded facilities and a new pool half the size of the original, but a new wading pool, bathhouse, and concession facilities. And as with Sunset Pool, Douglas was also raised in 2011. Yankee Road pool was constructed in 1937 for a cost of $40,000. In 1948, admission to the pool was 12 cents for persons 18 and under and 25 cents for adults. Facility went through a major rehab in 1952, but with the other Middletown public pools, it was also closed and torn down in 2011. 1933, the Venice Beach Country Club established. It actually began in 1928. Added a rather large swimming pool to its amenities. At this time, that the name of the entertainment site changed to Meadowbrook from the Venice Beach Country Club. Advertisements reported that the pool was filled with, quote, pure drinking water or, quote, artesian well water. The water was changed on a weekly basis. This fact led to the water being extremely cold on a consistent basis, sometimes hovering just above the 60-degree mark. The last time the pool was open for guests was in 1975. The following year, the property and all its equipment and amenities were put up for auction. Site continued to try to locate businesses there, whether it was catering, meeting space, wedding receptions, banquets. Had various owners from 1979 to 1922. In 1979, the pool was demolished. The facility is currently closed for business, but it is available for purchase. So if you're looking for a venue, Oxford Municipal was actually opened in 1935 to provide Oxford residents with a place to cool off. It was located on Fairfield Road, the facility which became known as the Tri-Complex. It was closed in 2018 in favor of new and improved facilities at a different location. But it was, I believe, the longest, one of the longest operating pools. So, estimated costs spent on snack foods and candies in the U.S. for 2025 is an estimated $156 billion, which is approximately the same gross domestic product of Kuwait. If you combine the soda sales and the snack food candy sales in the U.S., given earlier, that totals $544 billion, which is slightly lower than the GDP of Sweden, which ranks 24th in the world's production of goods. So what the U.S. spends on snack foods and soda is 24th of the top 200 nations in the world. So pretty impressive. Maybe that's why we look like the way we look. And I can talk because... potato chip manufacturer, Stauble's Food Products begins operations in Dayton in 1914. Jacob Staubel begins baking pretzels. Soon they open another operation in Springfield in 1920 and 1925. Hamilton becomes the third area to house a Staubel facility when Albert Staubel was named manager of the new facility at 205 South Monument Avenue. Company features potato chips, pretzels, and donuts. Distributorship includes a 25-mile radius from Hamilton. The company's motto, Best by Taste, is placed on all its marketing and product containers. By 1938, the company had moved to 31 Ludlow Street, but the popularity of Staubel's products dictated another move to 903 Central Avenue in 1941, where they would remain until their closing. Potato chips were regularly sold at most local bars, restaurants, and groceries, but the product line also included flavored popcorns, chips, cracklings, coffee cakes, and rolls. Eventually, in the 1940s, the baked products were phased out, and the company just focused on snack foods. The company was known for always keeping up with the latest technology and machinery for their processes. In 1955, Albert's passing, his wife Maribel and son Ted take over the family business. But eventually, the local company could no longer compete with the larger national snack food corporations, and after 50 years of business, Staubel's closes its doors in 1974. 1937, Paul Nunnemaker gave up his sales job and opened the business that he would run for the next 4 decades. At his storefront located at 111 Main Street, Nunamaker began his snack food business featuring traditional and flavored popcorns. He also sold small batch homemade potato chips, which he branded kitchen cooked, as well as a variety of nuts and hard pretzels. Business went well, and in the early 1940s, he relocates to 338 High Street. In 1951, Nunamaker was back on Main Street, incorporated his business, and that's when Nunny's Food Products is born. By that time, Creamy Whip, donuts, and Caramel Crisp were added to the product line, and after 40 years of providing quality snacks to the locals of Hamilton, Nunny's closes in 1977. A native of Georgia, Donathan Searly and his wife Huldah, twin sons Wade and George, began a small bakery out of their home located at 9 Sycamore Street in 1921. Home business features pies, soft pretzels, and waffles. By 1925, the family relocates their business and home to 155 Washington Street, and the eldest son, Tilden, joins them in the baking business for a short time. And as time passes, the Searly family gains a reputation for their quality baked goods. However, it was the pretzels that enjoyed the widest popularity among those in the neighborhood and beyond. 1935, Donathan retires, but various sons and daughters, of which there were 11, jumped in to assist the Searly family business throughout the years. Donathan passes in 1937, but by 1942, his son Wade and Wade's widowed and former sister-in-law Mary Lou are now operating a wholesale pretzel bakery out of 506 Heaton Street. After that, for the next 14 years, it seems the family gives up baking life, switches to factory work. However, in 1959, Donathan's grandson Jesse and his wife Mary revived the pretzel business to the delight of Lindenwold residents. Throughout the 1960s and 70s and into the 1980s, the family-run Searly Pretzel Bakery was located at both 2128 Dixie Highway next to Danny's Poultry, and then at 2241 Pleasant Avenue, which was the family's home. It was a common sight around Lindenwold, downtown Hamilton, and local businesses and factories to spot Searly pretzel boys, either on foot or on bicycles, hawking the family's wares out of baskets strapped to themselves. The pretzel boys and girls eventually were also a common sight at church festivals and around the Butler County Fair. And the rumor has it we actually have a couple of them in the audience tonight. So if you want to know how that went, you can ask them. Jesse's son Robert takes over the business for a short while. While in 1982-83, the much-beloved local businesses closes its door in 1984-1985. Never got the I actually got a chance, when was that, a month ago? Yeah, I actually got a chance to try one. I had heard the fame, and I never got a chance to. It is very good. They were very good. So if you ever had a chance to actually try one yourself, consider yourself lucky. 1956, Candies by Skalko's. So we threw a couple candy stores in. So Andrew Skalko and his wife Mary at 218 North 3rd Street. We just had someone come on tour today through the facility, and she said that Skalko's had the best Easter egg candies around that you could buy. Put anything nationally to shame. They would eventually have additional locations in Lindenwold at Pleasant and Fairview Avenues. Andrew came from a long line of candy makers. His great-uncle Lamont came to America from Greece in 1898, brought his recipes with him. Andrew's parents, Gus and Edna, were also in the candy business, and together they had a candy store in East Palestine, Ohio. And they opened up one of the finest candy stores in New York City in Wall Street for a while, but they came to Hamilton in 1933 and operated a store called the Goody Shop, located on High Street. Edna also ran the bus station lunch counter. They relocated to North 3rd Street in 1962 until the business closed in 1973. That's the same year that Andrew and Mary's Candies by Skalko's also ceased operations. Anybody here from Middletown or spent a lot of time in Middletown? Okay, my parents and my grandparents are all from Middletown, and there was a candy/ice cream store in Middletown. My grandmother called it Elites. The spelling is elite, so I don't know if it's Elites candy and ice cream or if it's Elites, but she always said Elites, but maybe that was just a transferred Kentucky pronunciation. I don't know. James Revelos immigrates to the village from Cosma, Sparta, Greece in 1903. spurned on by tales of the American dream and streets of gold and all that kind of stuff. He arrives in 1903. He's joined by brothers Nicholas, Charles, and John in 1905 and 1912. Theodore, another brother, comes but would return back to the homeland. They operate candy and ice business in Lima for a while. They move to Xenia and run it for a while. They move to Springfield and run it to a while. They find themselves in Middletown in 1909. And the original, and I'm going to say Elite, or Elite Confectionery and Ice Cream Store is located at 217 East 3rd. Wide variety of homemade candies, ice creams, ices, and of course it contained a soda fountain. It soon became popular with Middletown residents, and eventually it would continue to grow. They would continue to expand. At one point they would have 4 locations around Butler County. For a brief time they actually did have a location here in Hamilton, but for the most of them they had 3 locations in Middletown and 1 in Trenton for the longest period of time. When brothers Charles and Nicholas die in 1935 and 1941, the partnership of the brothers dissolves, but in true family business fashion, other members of the family step in. In 1950, they continue to expand. They moved to Trenton, or they expanded to Trenton in 1961. They opened up the 400 South Braille Boulevard location in 1964, which is the location that we were always taken to as kids by our grandparents. New offices and manufacturing facilities in the 1970s, but it was reported that, quote, changing economic times brought about the end of the Elite ice cream and confectionery business in 1988 after over 80 years of candy and ice cream excellence. Last thing that we're going to talk about real quick is the probably, if you had to name one product that was manufactured in Hamilton, this product probably most defines an era in American history. And I don't know, I'm going to go back real quick. I found this Orange Crush ad, and actually in the ad, there's a Skotch Kooler in the ad. There's also an episode of Mad Men out there where they have Skotch Koolers. I could not find what exact episode it was, but I found several references to it. Hamilton natives and brothers Myron and Herbert Piker inherit their father's business, Hamilton Sheet Metal Products, in 1946. The company began in 1919 to specialize in tackle and lunch boxes, filing boxes, and mailboxes. After the war, the business is struggling to survive. The pair needed a product or line of products to lift themselves out of economic crisis. They settle on a new minnow bucket design to be the answer to their problems. But apparently, the minnow bucket competition was apparently fierce in post-World War II United States. The brothers did what any enterprising businessman would do. They adapted the minnow bucket into a fiberglass insulated picnic bucket. They called the new product the Picnic with K's, P-I-K-N-I-K, but still the public refused to show interest in the product. As a last resort, the Pikers hire famed New York product designer Petra Cabot. Her iconic design appealed to the brothers immediately with its red and black plaid plastic fabric wrapping and leather trim accents and leather handle. The public loved the look of the product, but there was one major obstacle. To make a profit, the new cooler had to retail in 1951 for $49.99. That's about the equivalent of $600 today. So, that, of course, placed the cooler out of reach of the average consumer. So Herbert Piker comes up with a way to have the plaid and trim accents painted onto the metal, and the new Skotch Kooler is born at an amazing retail price of $7.95. Cooler was introduced at the National Hardware Show in New York City in the fall of 1951. Sales doubles in the first 2 years. The name of the company was changed to the Hamilton Skotch Corporation, and by 1954, sales had topped $5 million. Soon the line contained over 65 products of varying size, design, and function. For a brief time in the 1950s, Bob Hope lent his name to the product as a spokesman, and that's an ad there with him there with his family. Other lines from the company included Cornet and Cold Flight coolers, The look was soon copied by other companies, and today the cooler is a popular culture symbol of the 1950s. Soon the company was then creating licensed products for businesses, restaurants, universities, and colleges. We actually have a Scotch Cooler A&W gallon jug in there from 1962 in the exhibit. Eventually, the use of metal gave way to plastic in the late 1960s, early 1970s. In 1970, the Hamilton, Ohio manufacturing plant is closed and production is shifted to a plant that they had opened in Ottawa, Kansas, a little brief while before that. By the mid-1970s, most of the company's trademarks had lapsed and the company disappeared. In 2017, 3 entrepreneurs from Minnesota purchased the trademarks, and in 2020, new Scotch products were released to the public under the name Skotch Kooler USA. And that is, again, Scotch with a K and Cooler with a K. Skotch Kooler USA currently has 3 products available, all in the original plaid design. They are the grill, they have a soft side cooler, and they have a 2-gallon jug with a spigot. Cost for those products range from $185 to $295. But trust me, you can get the real vintage stuff for less than that on eBay and antique stores. There were millions of pieces produced, and we are lucky to have a rather large collection of those as part of the display as well. So that is all that I have. Thanks for sticking with me. We went a little bit long.